Maxing out is a skill. Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about the max effort method. And for those who don't understand the max effort method, in the conjugate system, that means that every week on a couple of different lifts, we ramp to a 1 rep max. Okay, what do we mean as a 1 rep max? You come in and you hit the heaviest weight that you can hit before form breaks down without excessively psyching up. Right? Because it's not a competition max, or until you miss a lift. Maxing out. And some of that's what you guys see me doing in the background up here. And on this system, though, we use a lot of different lifts, right? We don't just max on the same lift over and over and over. And if you guys listen to any of the stuff that Louis Simmons has said about that, he said repeatedly you can't. That even maybe a later novice lifter, we might do it 2 weeks in a row, the same exercise. But usually at week 3, you usually regress. And that's normal. Because you stagnate, you regress if you keep hitting the same lift. And that's why we don't max on the classic lifts that often. And it works, because maxing out is a skill. You know, a lot of people will see this system and say, well, how does that help? You're hitting a totally different lift. That deadlift there against heavy bands, and by heavy bands I mean we're talking about well over 100 pounds of bands pulling off blocks. Like, how's that carry over to the deadlift? Till they see me deadlift, they're like, oh yeah, you pull over 600 pounds. It does carry over. That box squat with the cambered bar, right there, cambered bar box squats, it will carry over to a normal back squat. Why? Because maxing is a skill. And it's not that lift specific. And people freak out when you say that. You know, they will say, no, you should just practice technique with a lighter weight, with the same classic exercise. And I'm sorry, guys, but that doesn't work the same. And I'm not saying it won't make you stronger. I'm not saying it won't make you bigger. I'm not saying it won't make you better, because it can. It totally can. You can come in and work with 80-85% on your squat, bench, deadlift. You could. But there's this misconception that people have that makes you better at a 1 rep max on its own. That the actual skill transfers. And what I'm telling you is that it doesn't. Now, if you do a bunch of volume with a normal back squat and it hypertrophies all the muscles involved with the squat, that will improve your squat. It might teach you some of the basic biomechanics of the squat, but you already know those. But it's irrelevant, because the movement pattern at 85% is not the same movement you're going to do with a max. The bar path's going to be different. The force that you exert is going to be different. It's going to be a slightly different movement. And if you haven't practiced maxing out, you're not going to reach your potential. And a perfect example, you could come in and build all the muscle you want doing a back squat. You can build all the muscle you want, but when you max out, you're still not going to know how to max. But if you max on a different squat variation, or 8 different squat variations, or 12 different squat variations, that will carry over. It will carry over. Because what do we do on a max? On a max lift, we take a weight, and we don't just come in and hit 1 rep. Like anyone who thinks that is clearly never maxed out. Look, you come in and you max, you add weight, and keep doing singles. Right? You might start with 450, go to 470, 490, 500, right? As you're building up, you might get 510, 520. So it's just what you guys saw me do right there. 515 plus chains off that box. Okay, you come in and you ramp up. Well, what does that teach you? It teaches you how to find a groove. It teaches you how to find your groove, and for that day. Because people will say that, well, I mean, it's the same. You could just do the same lift and it's just going to be the same groove. No, it won't. Your groove from 4 weeks ago on your back squat, because you might have eaten different food, your belt might be fitting tighter, your hips might be tighter that day. There's going to be different factors. That squat is not going to be identical. Okay, your groove can be slightly different day to day. What you ate the day before, the amount of water weight you're holding, how much body fat you've gained or lost in between, it's It's going to even affect the way your belt fits and rides. It's going to affect things with your hip positions. That movement will change. It's not going to be the same exact movement that you maxed on last time finding the groove. So what you do is you ramp up as you find your groove. That's why some days guys are like, and it just doesn't feel right. Why? Because you're trying to use the exact same movement pattern you used the last time on that normal classic back squat. And you have to find your groove for the day again. Because it's not going to be the same every day. As I said, there's going to be a lot of variables at play in your body. So you find it, and you find those positions, and you find the positions that you can move the most weight through, where the weight feels the lightest and you can explode through. Going to be a difference in bar path, hip position, when you externally rotate the hips, how tight you have to get your upper back. Okay, there's going to be different things. And if you're used to maxing out, you're used to just finding the groove, and you're used to straining against a really heavy weight. But it's not the fatigue strain, because that's a different type of strain. When you get to a heavy 5-rep max, that's a totally different strain at the end than a true single, because that's fatigue induced. It's not because the weight is that heavy, because you become fatigued relative to the amount of weight you're using. Right? 90%, 88%, 86% of your max might feel insanely heavy by the 5th rep, depending upon the movement and how you're doing that day. That's a different situation than it just being straight heavy. So maxing out teaches you to find your groove, and what I'm suggesting is that it doesn't matter if it's the same movement or not, it will carry over. In other words, you could max on 6 different types of sumo deadlifts and you get used to finding your groove pulling off the floor. You can come in and do a normal classic conventional deadlift and possibly even hit a PR on it without having done it, because you've learned the skill of ramping up to a max on a different set of pulls from the floor. They're close enough. Same thing with your box squat. It's the exact same thing. Learning to find the groove. The only one it might apply the least to would be the bench press. Why? Because the bench is the most skill specific. There's very little skill to most squats and deadlifts. I'm not saying there's zero, but they're low skill. The bench is a little more technical. But you can still brute strength your way through a big bench. I mean, we've heard lifters out there, like someone like James Strickland say once, oh yeah, I benched 450 before I learned how to bench. Then I realized maybe I should work on my technique a little bit. He's like, I just kind of brute strength my way through it. Let's sink in for a moment. In other words, if you're a big, strong dude, you could come in and hit a big bench without knowing how to bench that well, if you're strong enough. But what I'm also suggesting here is that the bench is probably the most impacted by technique. But what I'm implying is that if you have a base level of strength built and you're strong, you're going to move a big heavy weight. If you've practiced maxing, you've learned the skill of maxing. And that's what has to be stated here, and that's the real point of this video, is that the maxing is the skill, and it's not entirely lift specific. As much as people might want to tell you it is, oh no, you have to practice that. But then all of us who run this system come in and we hit lifetime PRs all the time on lifts that we don't practice. And I mean the big lifts, the back squat, the flat bench, right? We do different variations and still come in and hit PRs on every time we do them, PR after PR after PR. They're just not that important from a skill-specific side as far as that movement goes. The learning how to max out, which is ramping up and finding your groove for the day. And again, the technique of finding the groove, that's a skill. That skill is more important than what lift you chose. All right? Learn to find our groove. We learn how to strain against a really heavy weight and drive through. We also learn how to, when we miss our groove, because we're used to pushing and pulling against different angles all the time, as long as you're maxing out on stuff, you learn how to pull back into your groove when things go a little catawampus. And they will. If you're using different barbells, using bands, using chains, things are going to go a little squirrely on you sometimes. You learn how to just follow through and stay tight, pull yourself back into your correct bar path, and just push through. Okay? That's what you learn how to do. Maxing is a skill. Alright guys, well that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.